welcome Brian Azzarello and Frank Miller. All right, so they like you.
They don't mean it.
Well, we've got just free reign to talk about whatever we want. We talked a lot about Dark Knight yesterday. We can touch on that again if you want, but we have free reign to talk about anything and everything. Okay? So you steer me away from anything you don't want to talk about, but I thought we'd start by talking about what made you get into this crazy business. Who were your early influences, and what made you, what gave you the bug to be a comic book storyteller?
Well, I had to move to New York and get into comic books because I couldn't hold down any other kind of job. I'd been fired by my own father as a bus driver. And as a janitor, and all I really wanted to do was draw comic books. And so when I was 19 years old, I moved to the city and found a place to live and started pounding the pavement and looking for work. I was lucky. It was a good time to break in because there weren't many people wanting to get in, and work was available. They didn't pay much at the time, but work was available, and it was enough to keep me going.
Well, when you were growing up, reading comics, who were the people who were the artists you gravitated towards?
Well, when I was growing up, when I was a kid, by far and away the two artists who had the most overwhelming influence on me were Jack Kirby and Steve Ditko. Their Marvel comics were my childhood. As I got older and I saw more of the history of comics, and became more aware of artists like Joe Kubert. Believe me, the better you get as an artist, the more you appreciate Joe Kubert. And then I was able to see, well, the reprints came out of Will Eisner's Spirit, which transformed my whole way of approaching comics. Then Forbidden Planet opened in New York. This was after I became a professional. And all of a sudden, the whole world of comics opened up. Not just Jean Giraud, Mobius, who everybody's heard of, but Hugo Pratt and just dozens of other artists. So I became just exposed to a vast wealth of comic book art.
Is there anybody out there, either from back then or even today, who you think is, well, you just said the more you do comics, the more you appreciate Joe Kubert. Is there anybody out there, who would you say out there is the most underappreciated?
Underappreciated? Right. Boy, that is a really tough
Brian,
question.
you can chime in on that one if you want.
Please jump in if you got anything on your mind, Brian.
Man, I work with him. I think Eduardo Risso is probably one of the greatest storytellers alive.
Absolutely.
The thing is now there's so many great artists.
That's why I was stumping. The list is so damn long. It used to just
we happen to be working with a couple good ones right now too.
Yeah. One of the points that was made by somebody a long time ago, it's true of comics, is that a lot of people don't appreciate just how complex a number of skills you have to develop just to become a passable comic book artist. You've got to be able to tell a story. You've got to be able to draw anything and any situation. And you've got to make 6 images composed together on a single page. It's very complex.
Well, how did you learn that? There weren't comic book schools.
No, well, Joe Kubert had already started his school,
he had.
but I didn't go to it. No, mostly I've got to say I learned the most from going to Neil Adams' continuity studio where it was a halfway house for comic book artists where we were given advertising work to tide us over because the publishers paid so little that the only way to finance a comic book career was to do advertising work on the side. But Neil was not only doing that, providing that for comic book artists, but he would also spend endless amounts of time with this dumb kid from Vermont with these lousy drawings, and he would just tell me exactly how terrible I was. And he would tell me in no uncertain terms how I had no chance whatsoever of getting a single job. Then I kept coming back, and he picked up the phone and got me my first job.
Well, which was your first job? What was your first job?
It was a 3-page job for Twilight Zone magazine.
Yeah?
Yeah, it was I won't name the story. You can find it yourself. I don't think you'll be able to. I mean, it's pretty awful.
Well, then, what was your first comic job for any of the comics publishers?
I did some work for Weird War Tales at DC Comics, excuse me, was that applause?
Yeah.
All right, right there.
Thank you. Bounced around a bit and got offered this and that, but I was doing fill-in issues for like Marvel 2-in-1 and other things. And then I got a gig filling in for the artist on Peter Parker, the Spectacular Spider-Man.
I remember those issues.
And
Anybody remember those issues?
Two-issue. And it guest starred this Daredevil character. On the strength of that, when Gene Colan finally threw up his hands, and he'd already done 1 billion issues of Daredevil and just decided enough was enough, on the strength of that, I after much lobbying, got the job.
Have you? Did you talk to Gene Colan after that? Because up until then, Gene Colan had, like you said, he had done a lot of issues on that, and he was the guy for Daredevil.
Yeah.
And then you sort of usurped that title. Yeah. Did you and Gene ever talk about drawing Daredevil? I mean, did you ever say sorry for taking the Daredevil mantle from you?
Oh no, he didn't want it.
Really?
Well, he'd done it forever. I mean, but I never got to know Gene well, and we never had a lengthy conversation. But no, make no mistake, I didn't take his job. He quit.
He was
Yeah.
over. Actually,
believe me, they wouldn't have given me the job otherwise.
He went to do Batman at that point. He moved over. He moved across the street and started doing Batman.
Yeah.
So now that first issue of Daredevil you did, and
Yeah.
I remember this. The credit box, said with Jim Shooter and Roger McKenzie, and they put your name at the end because all these people, the way they credited it. Does anybody remember that issue? The first issue of Daredevil with Frank. They said all these people really think that lanky Frank Miller is going to be something.
Lanky Frank?
They welcome.
I knew you'd catch that one, Brian.
They were welcoming you aboard, and in like parentheses, they said, we really think he's going to be something.
That was Roger McKenzie. He wanted to turn over a new page with the book, with my entry to it. Daredevil had been turned into a pretty happy-go-lucky book over the years, and he knew I wanted to bring a pretty spooky look to it, and I had a determination that it would go from being a superhero comic in the traditional sense to a crime comic where the lead guy happened to wear tights. And so he gave me as big and as splashy a Marvel introduction as he could.
Yeah, I mean that was I had never seen anything like that in a credit box before, and so I was going to ask, was it just Roger who thought you were great, or was it did?
Oh no, Jim Shooter. I have to mention Jim Shooter. Not only was the He was the one who made the decision to get me the job. But he taught me an enormous amount about storytelling. And he threw more and more work at me and more challenges to the point where I had to start turning things away or I would be just part of the machinery so much. I'd be cranking things out faster than I should. But Jim was backing me all the way. A lot of people say bad things about him, but he's done many good things.
So Jim is, you credit Jim with elevating your career to the...
Absolutely.
When we do we do a My Secret Origin panel. We call it the My Secret Origin panel. So we get professionals to talk about, how they broke into comics. And there's always three parts to it. How did you get the itch to be in the comic book industry? Who was the person who really opened the door for you? If you were to name that person, you think it would be Jim? Or would it be
Person who
Neil?
opened the door, it'd be Neil Adams.
Yeah, Neil?
Yeah, without question.
Well, so you were on Daredevil for a while. Mm-hmm. When did you decide, or did you decide you wanted to write it, or did they say, hey, why don't you take a crack at writing it?
No, I lobbied, I argued, I didn't threaten any property damage whatsoever, but I really wanted the job, and I was very lucky to get it.
So were you nervous when you were writing and drawing it?
Oh yeah.
But
yeah.
But the first issue out of the box, right, was the Elektra issue.
Yeah, I've been waiting to introduce Elektra for a long time, and well, I did what any honest craftsman would do. I stole from the best. Will Eisner had done an unforgettable two-part spirit story called Sans Serif, and I stole the origin and turned it into Elektra.
Did you say stole, or would you say an homage to Will?
Yeah, but I've been homaged to death, so I say stole.
You had conversations with Will in later years. Did you make him aware of that?
Oh yeah. Will and I, we even did an interview book together, and when I showed him it, he was just very amused, and like he was by so many things, and it's hard to describe. I can't describe in one session how wonderful a man Will was to know through all of this. He was a natural-born teacher, a total raconteur, and the harshest critic you could ever ask for.
So he wasn't just a great artist, great storyteller. He was a personally likable and admirable person.
An unforgettable man.
Yeah. I don't know if you were to pick your top 5 comics creators. You figured Eisner's in there. Who would you fill out the list with? I mean, the people that the people that you love in this industry or who have affected you the strongest. Oh yeah. Let's deal with the elephant in the room. Yeah, Brian would be there, right?
Brian Bolland? As far as artists go, the ones that do leap to mind are Jack Kirby. I learned an awful lot about dynamic figure drawing from Gil Kane. But when it comes to storytelling, there are so many. I mean, there was one point where I was trying to do entire sequences paced like Bernard Krigstein's work from EC, which was this very staccato movie-like approach that was remarkable, but so painstaking and so attempting to be a movie, it hurt. But as I mentioned, when Forbidden Planet opened, my horizons just opened wide, and now the list could take us all day and night.
Well, now you talk about Forbidden Planet opening another world. There's another generation of comic creators who credit Forbidden Planet, but then they also credit that manga store in Rockefeller Center,
Sure.
Konokiya.
Yeah.
When did you discover Asian comics?
Well, I discovered Asian comics through a friend's father had been to Japan and brought back this really fat little comic book. Looked kind of like a small phone book. And once I figured out they had to read it backwards, I was enchanted by the artwork. In fact, beyond enchanted, I was captivated and decided to imitate it as best I could. I couldn't read a word of it, I couldn't read the title, but I decided I'd do a samurai comic and it would look as much like that as possible. And so Kozuri Okami, or Lone Wolf and Cub, had already inspired my Ronin. And so the more I studied the more I was able to learn a much fresher approach to storytelling than we had used in a long time. Because of the Japanese kept the comics in black and white and on really crappy paper and all of that, they were able to indulge the page count to an insane degree in a way American comics can't, because we're all in color, and now we're on slicker and slicker paper. So we've made them more precious, and we've lost some of the energy along the way. One of the many things I'd like to do with comics in the future is try to reintroduce some of that vigor and some of that almost bloodthirsty quality that you can get with cheaper production values.
Oh, that's interesting. Well, now that leads us good into a sort of a larger context. You look at the comics industry today. I mean, you've studied the art form. You've been in it a long time. Where would you like to see it go?
Everywhere.
What do you mean by everywhere?
I mean, I don't want to be the one to say. I know the places that I immediately would like to take it, but I want there to be. I want this to be the Tower of Babel. Why isn't there a really good Western out there?
Because they won't buy it.
Okay, we got one. He would
Yeah.
buy it. Two.
Well, I was told they wouldn't buy crime comics either.
They do buy crime comics.
They didn't.
Well, they do now.
Yeah.
But Westerns, they don't buy anymore.
Make a Western, Frank.
Yeah, I dare you, make a Western.
I hate Brian.
Well, do you have a Western in you? Do you have a Western story in you?
I could.
Yeah?
We'll buy it.
Yeah, that's what you say.
What else do you wish was out there in comics? Or think about the readership of comics, or the medium itself, or how they're sold, or how they're promoted, or I mean, what do you?
I think
what
the
do
way
you wish
comics
for?
are sold and promoted is, as far as I can tell, excellent. What I'm more, but then that's not my department. But as far as what's being created, the idea is I don't want to be the only voice in the room. I've mentioned a bunch of stuff that I'd like to do, but it's mainly a matter of more and more people of talent to be attracted to work in comics, and then to see what they're going to do. And luckily we've had publishers since the undergrounds, and then on to publishers like Fantagraphics and others, who've brought us extraordinary work that we would not otherwise have seen. And thanks to the direct market, it doesn't have to sell to everybody in order to make profit. So I think all the avenues are there, and it's just a matter of I think more than anything, the burden is on the artists and the publishers to step up to the plate and deliver the goods, and hopefully the readership to be open to stuff that doesn't involve spandex.
Yeah, it's never been more diverse than it is now, and it
That's
just keeps
absolutely
getting
true.
more diverse, too.
Absolutely.
Especially when you consider international comics, the
Oh,
international
yeah.
publishers.
Well, when we were in Paris, we went to the Album, which is a comic store there. And, we loaded up on stuff that's not even, it'll never be here,
Yeah.
unfortunately. There's a
Yeah.
lot of really great stuff being done in France.
Well,
for example.
it'll never be here, so it's in terms of the genre, in terms of the format, in terms of the subject matter.
In terms of translated, you
Okay.
know.
But I mean, they're so different. But I mean, are they so different because it's not spandex?
Well, yeah, they like Westerns.
I like Westerns. They really like Westerns.
They do, yeah. And they like crime comics too, They don't, spandex is just a small, niche over there.
Yeah.
And most of the stuff, I mean, it all gets translated, but
Yeah.
Well,
we don't go for, I mean, there's romance comics, there's historical fiction.
Yeah,
We
you
don't
mentioned
think
romance comics. Now, romance comics used to be the #1 kind of comic books in the United States. There was a romance period, there was a horror period, and then the superheroes took over. Losing romance, we lost an entire readership that we could have, and entire kind of stories that we could be writing, and also artists artists like John Romita Sr. cut their teeth on romance comics.
Frank Frazetta.
Frank Frazetta, yeah, better example. Jeez, but that could again would attract more and more talent on the writing and the drawing side.
Well, but the romance comics, I mean, they lasted for a couple of decades,
Yeah.
and then they died because of the rise of romance novels. That's my understanding of it. I mean, it's not like the publishers just decided we don't want to do romance comics anymore.
Then how come so many comic books are based on, I mean, it works both ways. Usually, I mean, a rising tide raises all ships, and that's not how I understand market dynamics to work. If anything, the more visual medium should usually prevail.
I would normally agree. My understanding is that the women who were buying romance comics sort of switched over to the novels because there's more sort of bang for the buck, and it had
They could be
the more
racier.
illusion of legitimacy. Instead of reading a comic, I'm reading a novel.
Yeah, and we've seen the cover paintings. We know that Brian's right.
Yeah.
It could be a lot racier.
Yeah.
I don't know. There's room for everything, though.
The Comics Code Authority and romance don't go hand in hand.
That's another point. Is the Comics Code Authority was really they were unneeded leg braces on comic book art.
Yeah.
Well,
it's amazing we survived.
Yes.
yeah, I mean, talk about that era. I mean, in your mind, I think.
Well, we weren't born yet.
Well, your understanding of that era is what I meant. I mean,
Sure.
to your mind, and I think most people would agree, is obviously that Comics Code period, the whole, the Wortham years and after, obviously slowed the evolution of comics as an art form.
Yeah, but also it also showed something else. A pop psychologist of no great note wrote a really, really badly written book called Seduction of the Innocent, where he put forth this silly notion that reading crime comics would turn people into rapists and burglars and murderers. No, it wasn't based on anything. I read the book. I'm one of the few people who's actually read the damn thing. And it's the worst written piece of garbage you're ever going to come across. But all it's ever taken to scare the comic book industry into submission is a couple of angry letters, and the reaction of the comics industry to this stupid book and to some comic book burnings that took place was to basically find a shell to hide under. And the main thing, I mean, the wonderful thing with the direct market and with a new generation of artists coming in and writers, we crawled out from under that shell. And it's just a matter of continuing to do so. I think we're on our way.
Well, so do you think, how long do you think it took for the comics industry to recover from that period, creatively?
50 years.
50 years?
Mm-hmm.
Set us back that long?
Yeah.
That long? Do you think the fetters are off at this point, and we're
Oh, I can't say, yeah, they are.
They're off.
Now you can blame us.
well, let's talk about blaming you. I mean, is there
Bring it on, man.
no? Is there, looking back now, is there anything that that you've done, that you've influenced on the industry that maybe you regret?
When you tore up Wizard magazine. The-
Did I regret?
Yeah. Is there I wish I hadn't done that because it created this, or I wish I hadn't done that because now I'm sick of seeing it, and or well, that was just stupid.
Well, I guess I wish I hadn't somehow convinced people that making the heroes all messed up inside and angry all the time was the only way to do it.
But then Dark Knight 2 was a reaction to that.
Yeah.
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 I mean, that's what.
Dark Knight 2 was meant to be a celebration of all that is spandex and to show off how cool the powers were and everything, and even Batman smiles in it.
Yeah. So you opened up your you started playing with more toys from the sandbox. You brought in the innocent characters like Captain Marvel and things like that. And so it was more of a celebration of the hero at that point.
Celebration, also celebration of the superhero, and just trying to find a way to approach them that might freshen them up a little bit. So I studied each one. Where I felt I achieved some success was with the atom, with just making the equation change a little bit. So instead of having a tiny little figure jump all over the page, I just made normal objects get really big around him. And so he would stay of heroic stature. It's just, this would be 30 feet tall. and that gave it, there was a surreal visual to be had there. I didn't get to explore it much in Dark Knight. That's for a future project. But if you see the old 1957 movie, The Incredible Shrinking Man, you'll see what I was talking about. In that they used props to make ordinary objects gigantic, and the heroic combat at the end is between a man and a spider that looks like it's 30 feet wide, and all he's holding is a sewing needle to defend himself. And it's one of the most chilling scenes you'll ever see. So all these characters are full of magic. You got a guy, you got Green Lantern, he's got Aladdin's lamp. And when I revisited Flash in Dark Knight, my solution was, I wasn't going to be able to draw a guy running like Carmine Infantino did. Nobody can. Nobody can draw that many figures in a row that fast. So I just figured the Flash is already there. And you don't see him move that much. But all of the stuff can be revisited and reinvented. It's wonderful material.
Okay, then. So Dark Knight showed us the dark side of superheroes. Started the whole sort of darker period of where everybody was examining the darkness, the shadows of the heroes. Dark Knight 2 was a reaction to that. bringing back the super to superheroes. So how would you, in that trilogy then, how would you, where would you say Dark Knight 3 fits in? What's the, what's the overarching theme of Dark Knight 3 then?
Over to you, Captain.
Well, once once all those other characters were introduced, we couldn't put them, you can't put them back in the box.
Yeah, right, yeah.
They're out there.
Yeah.
So, why not, embrace them? Also, I think we're doing a little rehabilitation of Superman here.
Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah, I mean, it's a. Sometimes I feel bad about what I did to Superman.
You should.
You weren't kind. Okay, well, let me ask you this. What do you want to do next?
Me?
Yeah. What do you want to do next?
Oh, just about everything there is. The next, I want to return to Sin City. I've also got the itch to explore doing more historical work along the lines of 300. That in particular is what I got in mind. I also would like to revisit some of those old toys again. I'm just not sure which ones or when.
Some of the DCU toys?
Yeah.
Okay. Be nice to get a little bit of applause for, him visiting the DCU.
I've got a Superman story in me that I'm dying to do. It would be a World War II story, and
Ooh.
the visuals would be inspired by the Max Fleischer cartoons, and it would also re-examine Superman's Jewish origins. Not a joke.
Wow.
Jerry Siegel, Joe Shuster.
Well, we know what the headline in tomorrow's news is going to be then. We have a few minutes left. If anybody has any questions, we have mics on both sides. I'm running a little long, so but I do want to get some questions. So you over on the left. Yep, it's on. Go ahead.
Hey, I just wanted to ask about your experiences with Hollywood, Frank. I know you, RoboCop 2, RoboCop 3, all the way to Sin City.
Yeah.
How I know Robert Rodriguez had to hassle you to get Sin City made, so.
Yeah, what do you think of
Oh,
Hollywood?
I was a real pain in the butt with Robert. I was, he called me up and said that he wanted to make a movie out of Sin City, and I was just really crabby with him. Because I'd worked as a screenwriter, and I was just convinced that I couldn't get anything through the process, that Sin City's my baby. I just I felt like could I really
Ugly
just,
baby.
what?
What an ugly baby.
Heck, Brian, you're breaking my heart. Robert showed me how he worked and showed me that we could really do it. And, we set about to do it, and it was a magical experience from start to finish.
It's still the best comic book movie.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hi, Frank. I know at one point you were offered the opportunity to work on Doctor Strange, and I know it never panned out.
Right.
Do you regret, I guess, not working on Doctor Strange? And given the opportunity, would you work on that character, and how would you change, influence, what would you put into Doctor Strange?
Steve Ditko. I would never do Doctor Strange because he's been done to perfection, and I have nothing. No, let me take that back. I have nothing new to bring to it. Anybody else might have something, a whole new take that would be completely fresh and new. It's just not in me.
Okay, so no regrets whatsoever then, not getting that opportunity.
Boy, everybody wants to know what you regret, man.
I'm Edith Piaf. I regret nothing.
Hey Frank, I want to say I'm a big fan of your character Electra Nachios.
Thank you.
I think she's a great superheroine and a great addition to the Marvel. I read somewhere online that you weren't crazy about the way Electra was developed in the second season of the Netflix series Daredevil. I'm not sure if that's true. If it is, what would you change about the character? Because she looks like the Frank Miller Electra that you created, but she didn't quite seem like she acted like the Frank Miller Electra that you created.
Well, you know, reading things online, you know, it's you know, it's kind of like hearing a voice in a cup with a string on it. I haven't seen the series.
So he didn't say that.
Okay.
I haven't seen the series precisely because I might say something like that.
Yeah.
I mean, I just haven't gotten around to it.
All right, thanks.
It's on
bet.
Netflix.
Hi,
You-
Frank, my question is, I read a long time ago about a collaboration with Bill Sankovich called Drop Dead. Do you happen to, I don't ever remember reading what it was going to be about or anything like that. If you could give any indication if that was a true collaboration idea or if you knew what it was going to be about?
No, if Bill and I had planned on doing something, you'd have seen it by now.
Oh, okay.
But no, we never had any project by that name planned whatsoever.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Yep, thank you.
Yeah, what are you guys reading?
Yeah, did you read about that online? It was online.
Of course it was online.
Is there a question over here?
Out of all the artists you've got to work with to see your story get put to life, which would you say is your favorite artist?
I wouldn't. I've only worked with friends, and I would never be so rude. But thanks for the question. I just couldn't answer that question.
You stumped the master. You stumped the master. Good over here.
How's it going? I was watching the animated series last night for like the first time ever, like finishing season like 4 or whatever, the like gold disc. On the episode like Legends of Dark Knight, they take back and they like recall stories of like Batman and what they think he is.
Yeah,
and one
yeah.
of them's yours from Dark Knight. Did you pitch that idea, or did they just be like they just like do it and we're just like we want to homage to like that because that's an amazing story?
Well, I'm friends with Paul Dini and Bruce Timm, the masterminds behind the series, and they dropped that. They dropped a disc of that on my lap as a Christmas present. It was a complete surprise. They did a wonderful job.
They did so amazing because I've seen the new animated and I was literally just watching this last night. It came up and I'm just like, oh, that's so cool. I also like say that like I feel like you literally invented hipsters with that Robin like back in the day. Because like I thought that movie was new and I was new to this story this year. So like I'm watching it and I realized it's 30 years old and I'm just like, he invented hipsters. That's amazing.
Yeah.
So
Thank you.
thanks.
That's something you should
Yeah.
regret.
Do you regret that?
I regret nothing.
We got a question over here?
This is a question for both Frank and Brian. Is there any advice that you guys would give to new writers working in comics these days? From all your
Don't.
experience?
Yeah, forget what the word no means because you're going to hear it a lot.
Absolutely.
You know,
Absolutely.
just keep at it. Write every day. Writing, it's a muscle, man. You know, you got to exercise it.
And I recommend a book by E.B. White called The Elements of Style. That'll teach you as much about writing as you'll find anywhere.
Thank you so much.
I think it's Rule 19, that's omit needless words. They taught us that in school. That one.
Hey Frank, I'm a 30-year military vet, and I want to say
Sir.
thank you for your artwork and your drawings. And I grew up with your stuff live as it hit the shelves, and I appreciate it. And I took it everywhere I went when I had time down. I wanted to read your stuff, and it kept me grounded. So thank you. My question to you is Dark Knight 2. There's one scene that's always bothered me.
Yeah?
Just one.
Just one.
Just one. Just one.
You didn't do your job.
When Batman appears as a hologram to Superman, giving him shit, saying, "You work for me now."
Yeah.
You drew him different, Batman himself, than anywhere else in the comic. It was almost back towards Dark Knight, the Returns. Did you do that intentionally for some reason? Because it always made me think, like, why did he change the style for that particular scene?
Well, what we did there was and Lynn Varley was coloring it on computer at the time. And deliberately made the image more distorted on the computer. And she pixelated it a bit so that it would look like a hologram. So that's the best answer I got about that.
Okay, but I meant that the actual drawing
Yeah.
that you did
Yeah.
looked like Dark Knight Returns more than the style you were going for in Saw It. It was a subliminal thing then for you. You didn't really.
Yeah, it must have been, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
You bet, thank you.
Over there.
For Frank, have you said everything that, as a writer, that you want to say about Batman at this point, or do you think you ever will?
Please say no.
Hell no. The best comparison I've used it a number of times I can make about Batman is that he really is like a diamond. You can bounce him against the ceiling and throw him through a rotary fan, and you just can't break him. There's always some new trick to play with him, some new situation to put him in. I've never made use of Batman as an escape artist, for instance.
Ooh.
That's just one example of the the things that could be done with him. After I did Dark Knight, I bounced back and wrote Year One, based on story notes I had just to get me ready to do Dark Knight. And there's always seems to be more about that character. Like Superman, he's just rich beyond belief. That's why they've lasted so long and kept their audience. A lot of these characters just wither on the vine. You really don't see a lot of reincarnations of the hawk and the dove, for instance.
Okay, we're up against time limit. We got time for one last question. So over there, let's make sure you have a good one.
I believe it's a good one.
Okay, good.
Okay.
We'll be the judge of that.
You talked about doing more historical stories for the future. How much time do you take when you're doing your researching? Like, for example, 300. Yeah. How much time did you take to fully research that piece before putting ink to pen? Same for you, Brian. How much time do you take when you're doing your historical pieces to do the full research?
Well, you got to do the research, because I think, especially with historical stuff, because if it comes off like you don't know what you're talking about, you can smell that, man. Yeah. You really got to. But then at the same time, you can't be too beholden to it, because it gets kind of dull.
If I dressed up the Spartans like they really dressed up, and had them move like they really had to move, you would have been asleep by page 2. Those battles were slow and grueling and gruesome. I made them run around pretty much naked and just kept the helmets and the capes. These guys were covered in body armor, and they wore leather skirts. So you have to take liberties right and left. As far as the researching goes, I would just do more of it, but I would feel freer to ignore it. Because I'm not a teacher. The best thing 300 could accomplish along those lines would be to get somebody excited about learning what the reality is.
Right, and to see everything that you did wrong.
Oh yeah, and then tell me about it. Yeah.
But that's the point. That like you can't you can't play jazz unless you know how to play music.
Yeah.
You got to be classically trained, and then you learn how to improvise.
Wonderful. Thank you.
That's a good way to put
Your
it.
question was good.
Yes, it was a good question.